Hi, this is JR. This is the Turning Away from Evil series. Immaturity and Maturity is part 1. It was originally a 3-part series, and as of right now it's a 5-part series because I had some replies and made those into parts 4 and 5. So the first contrast that I explore is maturity and immaturity. Maturity is a label for inner peace or inner orderliness, even in the midst of external chaos or fast-paced transition or disruption. Immaturity is required for the development of maturity. Maturity doesn't just happen by itself. There's a phase of relative immaturity through which maturity can arise, eventually, or suddenly. So immaturity is attempting to prevent some particular pattern of activity within the universe. That's my definition. Immaturity is attempting to prevent some particular pattern of activity within the universe. It's not a bad thing. It's just not maturity. It's immaturity, to attempt to prevent some particular pattern of activity within the universe. For instance, it would be foolish to attempt to stop the wind from blowing in a particular direction unless you simply want to exhaust yourself. It doesn't work to stop the wind from blowing if it's already blowing. So this isn't just to interrupt or interfere with a particular moment. This is to prevent something from ever happening. That's actually more what I mean by immaturity, to prevent something from ever happening. Not to interrupt something or to stop something. That's not what I mean by immaturity. But to always prevent the wind from blowing in a particular direction, ever, that would be extremely challenging, right? In other words, impossible. So rather than energizing something by resisting it or protesting it or attempting to prevent it, we can simply promote a contrary possibility, a contrasting potential. So again, interrupting something is one thing. Protests and resistance are attempts to interrupt something or to interfere with something, and that's okay. But I'm calling that immaturity. If it's a pattern, not just an instance of response, like spontaneous response. If there's a particular pattern that I'm going out of my way to prevent in general, then that's what I'm calling immaturity. Okay? As another example, besides trying to stop the wind from blowing in a particular direction, can anyone prevent any particular bridge from ever collapsing, no matter what, like whatever might ever happen? Earthquakes, meteor strikes, so on. We can't realistically say that we can prevent a particular bridge from ever collapsing. We can't say, here's an outcome that we will absolutely, certainly prevent. We could say that, but is it realistic to say that? So it's not possible to totally prevent the collapsing of all bridges. Eventually, every bridge will collapse. And so it's not possible to totally prevent the collapsing of any bridge. Something could happen. A meteor strike, earthquake, flood might, wear away the... maybe a volcano comes and burns, covers up the bridge with lava or something. So it's not possible to totally prevent the collapsing of any bridge. But the stability or reliability of any bridge can be measured. And then the bridge can be strengthened, or it can even be blocked for safety if it's deemed to be unsafe. If it's measured and shown to be unsafe, then it can be blocked or disassembled. So strengthening a bridge is totally possible, but preventing it from ever collapsing, that's unrealistic. The immaturity of attempting to totally prevent a particular pattern is also called terror. Why do I want to totally forever prevent some particular pattern? Terror. That's why. I'm terrified of it. The immaturity of attempting to totally prevent a particular pattern is also called terror or disturbance. I'm disturbed by it, or I'm disturbed about it. Or shame. I'm ashamed of it. That's why I want to totally prevent it. Or sin. I maybe think of it as a sinful thing, or I may even be in a mode of sin to be attempting to prevent God's creation from manifesting in a particular way. Now, if you don't find the wording I just used favorable, fine, don't use that. Use something else like the idea of attempting to prevent any particular form of manifestation in the universe is futile. It's foolish. To try and permanently stop the wind from ever blowing to the east, that's stupid, silly, that's idiotic. We would think that's a joke, right? You're joking about that, right? It's naive. But to have that strong reaction of trying to totally prevent something like an obsession or a preoccupation or a fixation with trying to prevent that, that's panic. So that's why we would try and prevent something. It's because there's a terrified panic, a shame, a disturbance, some kind of condemnation of it. And that is in the realm of what I'm going to call sin, and I'll say more about that later. So trying to prevent something is immature or futile or foolish. I'm talking about totally always preventing something. That idea of always permanently preventing some particular pattern from ever arising, that's futile. That's foolish. And that is why I'm calling it immature. And because it's futile and immature and foolish and so on, that's why so many ancient traditions remind us that if a pattern disturbs you, simply turn away from it. Don't try and prevent it. Turn away from it. This is classically stated in the phrase, turn away from evil. That's how it's commonly translated in English. Turn away from evil. Turn away from what disturbs you. Turn away from what frightens the heck out of you. Why? For your own sanity, for your own peace of mind. That's the first reason why. Okay, there are some other reasons why. Hypothetically, we can come back to that. So, in other words, if a pattern disturbs you, simply turn away from it. Withdraw from it. Don't stare at it. Don't obsess over it. Don't be preoccupied with preventing it. That's futile. In other words, turn away from evil. This is a sign of maturity and of faith. And the result of turning away from evil is the maintaining of inner peace. The fruit of turning away from evil is the maintaining of inner peace, or the swift return to inner peace in the event that inner peace might lapse. So, again, another ancient teaching, abstain from contempt. Refrain from condemnation. Renounce these as sinful, immature, unproductive, ineffective. To have contempt ongoingly for something, that's not peace of mind. That's not ideal. That's not appealing. That's unfortunate. To have contempt and repulsion and condemnation for something. So we renounce condemnation and contempt as unproductive, ineffective, immature, exhausting, frustrating. They don't work very well. Sometimes. That doesn't mean that they should never arise. They do arise sometimes. So obviously they should arise because they do. God creates, or the universe creates, contempt sometimes. The universe creates condemnation sometimes. But that always is coming from some kind of fear, some kind of panic, some kind of terror, some kind of shame, a disturbance. It's not a great sign. So if you're the one who is disturbed or upset or trying to prevent some particular pattern from ever happening, well, make note of that and renounce that that orientation. Shift. Explore something else. Calm down a little bit. Withdraw from the thing that's maybe upsetting or disruptive, and look for, well, what else do you want to create? What else do you want to interrupt, if anything? So abstain from contempt, abstain from condemnation, renounce condemnation, renounce contempt as immature, as sinful, or unproductive, something that doesn't work very well. So let's recall the teaching of the famous Jewish prophet, Jesus, and some of his early disciples and apostles. First, Jesus said, the first one I'm going to state is Jesus' statement, condemn not. It's obviously translated into English from another language, for those of you who know much about the Bible. Condemn not is the English translation, common English translation. That's from Luke 6:37. Another one, I say to you not to resist the evil. That's, again, Jesus' statement as recorded and translated in Matthew 5:39. Now here's a couple of things that were not statements of Jesus, but by some of his early followers. I am conscious of this and am certain in the Lord Jesus that nothing is unclean in itself. But for the man in whose opinion it is unclean, for him it is unclean. It's Romans 14:14. In other words, if it's disruptive for him, if it's disturbing, if it's repulsive to him, then he could turn away from it. It's not that it's unclean in and of itself, repulsive inherently, but for him, it's repulsive. That's a personal experience. And if he's repelled by something, or she, or whatever, then turn away from it. Rather than trying to prevent a particular thing from ever happening, like a bridge ever collapsing, well, just do what you can to measure its strength and strengthen it, or realize, that's not a really worthwhile bridge to strengthen. It's pretty weak. Let's not use it. Let's even tear it down or put up a warning sign or something. Nothing is unclean or impure or evil even in itself, but for the man who is afraid of it, or who's disturbed by it, or who's repulsed by it, disgusted by it, well, then it's disgusting to him. Then it's repulsive to him or her, so on. All right, last quote in the last bit of part 1 here, from Titus 1:15. To the pure, all things are pure. But to those who are corrupted and without faith, nothing is pure. In fact, both their minds and consciences are corrupted. To the pure, all things are pure, but to those who are corrupted and without faith, without maturity, we might say, nothing is pure. This goes back, reminds me again of that Romans quote I just said. Nothing is unclean in itself, but for the man in whose opinion it's unclean, for him it is unclean. So these are some ancient teachings, but they might be unfamiliar to you. I don't think that they're emphasized much in mainstream Christianity. Condemn not. I say to you, resist not the evil. I say to you, not to resist the evil. Nothing is unclean in itself. To the pure, all things are pure. Those are some kind of radical statements. That's part 1 of turning away from evil, immaturity and maturity.